Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Dan, for the invitation tonight. Am I coming across okay with the microphone? Great. Tonight, as you heard, I'd like to talk about the work that the Steinkamp brothers did in and around Cincinnati, and go into some detail about some of these buildings.
Have you seen this building yet?
Has anybody seen this building?
Yes.
Yeah, you probably drive by it quite often. It's on River Road. So if you come to Delhi from downtown, you probably have driven past it. It was, I'm sorry, I'll get it, don't worry. It was designed by the Steinkamp brothers in 1918 for the U.S. Electric Tube Company. And it has quite a bit of detail in it. Unfortunately, it's been painted this really dark gray and it hides a lot of the detail. So, in 2001, I published this book on the Steinkamp brothers, and basically I'm going to talk about my research and what I found when I was developing this book. When I first came here, I was on a one-year sabbatical from the University of Texas School of Public Health, and I thought it'd be fun to live downtown in a loft for a year, and it was really very interesting. It was very convenient to the restaurants and the theaters and stuff. But I didn't realize the building on the right there, I was staying in the Hale Justice Lofts. The building on the right, there was the American Building, which I didn't know at the time was designed by the Steinkamp brothers. And the building on the left was the Town Cadillac Motor Car Company, which at the time was kind of a bar or a nightclub type of thing, but is now the home to the No Theater. So I was actually surrounded by Steinkamp buildings and I wasn't even aware of it. So why do I call them the Lost Architects? Between them and some of the work by their father originally, they designed about 300 buildings. I just don't think they get the recognition as some of the Cincinnati architects. I have nothing against Samuel Hannaford. He was a great architect, designed some spectacular buildings, but you hear all the time, that's a Hannaford building. This is the Hannaford building. You don't hear, this is the Steinkamp building, or that's the Steinkamp building. So I thought they needed to have a little bit more recognition. Their grandfather was instrumental in the construction of Old St. Mary's Church downtown and over the Rhine, and he also was the supervisor for the construction of that. Their father was called basically J.B. Steinkamp is what he went by, and he was involved, worked as a carpenter and then worked as a superintendent of construction for the Emery family. He actually worked with Samuel Hannaford. Hannaford designed the first building on the University of Cincinnati campus, and J.B. was the superintendent on that project. Now, just a short family history. Joseph worked with his father on West Court Street until his father's death in 1890. And then they had moved the office down to East Court Street, And after his younger brother, Bernard, finished his schooling, he joined the company and they formed Joseph G. Steinkamp and Bro, architects and superintendents. Now I've seen Ian brothers and I've seen Ian sons, but it was just Joseph and Bernard in this company. So when Joseph's father passed away, Joseph was the youngest architect in Cincinnati, youngest practicing architect in Cincinnati. They also partnered with C. Howard Gillespie and Nelson Felsberg for a number of years, usually in the later years. And as I mentioned, they designed about 300 buildings, not just in Cincinnati, though, as far away as St. Bernard, Dayton, Charleston, West Virginia. So they really spread out where they did the work. They did a little bit of work in Kentucky, but not too much. Joseph lived most of his life in Price Hill, but he moved to Delhi in 1934. Bernard lived in Evanston pretty much all of his life. Bernard passed away in 1943, and Joseph 5 years later, in 1948. Now, this was the original Steinkamp home on at 912 Swire Avenue. This was built in 1869. Joseph and Laura, his wife Laura, and the two children moved there in about 1902. So Joseph designed the addition to the right side of the home there on Swire Avenue. And in 1920s, no?
Yeah, it got worse. I think you're fine.
Okay. I'll try to do my best.
Just talk without it.
No,
No, we need that, we need the volume.
Yeah. You know, they had to kind of put this together at the last minute. This is not their typical setup, so I apologize.
That is better when your mic is down.
Okay, all right. I'll try to keep it there.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Joseph and Laura purchased the 2 lots next door at 912 Swire Avenue and built the home, which I purchased in 2003. Unfortunately, as soon as Joseph was finished with his new home, he put this house on the market trying to sell it, and almost immediately put his new home on the market. And almost every month he put an ad in the Inquirer trying to sell his home, even saying he would take the best offer. But unfortunately, in 1929, actually just before the crash, it sold at auction, and he and his family had to move back door into this farmhouse. This is the home that he designed and built for himself, and which I purchased in 2003. It's a very, very unique home with lots of detail. There's the coat of arms above the living room. This is probably kind of a fanciful coat of arms. They were not royalty, but the crown signifies that they may have come from royalty, but they certainly did not. And these, I don't even know how to pronounce that, Garuda heads, which are thought to protect against envy and jealousy and ward off any hatred and evil eyes. And really, these were over the master bedroom. You know, I've looked around on buildings in Germany and Cincinnati, and really have not been able to find anything comparable to these. I think Joseph kind of had a sense of humor in some of his, the way he decorated buildings. But the home had...
Did you say that was on in Price Hill?
Weird.
Swire Avenue. It's just
Close to Elder.
right near Elder. Everybody who goes to Elder knows the little stone house.
Right.
Yes. But there's all kind of detail in the leaded glass windows. There's these figures etched in them. There's elaborate terrazzo floors in the living room and dining room, which have cathedral ceilings and each beam is hand stenciled. Just a huge amount of detail. The sconces going around the living room portray a German folk dance, and these same figures are also on the chandelier in the living room. The chandelier in the dining room has weird things, unicorns, goats, and all kinds of weird figures on it. The fireplace has this inscription from Longfellow, taken from one of his poems. I think it's quite appropriate for someone who designs homes. Now, they built so many different types of structures, many large apartments all around the city, downtown and outside around the city. They built a number of four-story apartment buildings. These would have retail on the first floor, one or two retail shops, and the upper 3 floors would be apartments. They designed the original buildings on the Xavier University campus, and the office buildings, grocery stores, as you can read there, factories, churches, schools, and so on. Funeral parlors, they did quite a few funeral parlors too. They did banks and movie theaters, auto dealerships and garages, homes all around the city, different parts of the city. The Art Deco pumping station in the Weston Hills pumping station, which I'll talk a little bit about later. They also designed one barn, one stable, stockyards, and one tunnel. Now, Samuel Hannaford was designing the Palace Hotel, which is now the Cincinnati Hotel. And the way the story goes is that part of the structure collapsed during construction. And this was being built by the Emery family. And so basically the Emerys got rid of Hannaford and hired Joseph Steinkamp, probably Joseph and his father, to complete the design or the supervision, probably, of the hotel. And a couple of days later, there was a kind of a scathing article in the Inquirer saying how the Emerys cut corners, used inferior materials, and this is why the collapse took place. But this building is still there, and it's 130 years later, so who knows? They also designed downtown the Mercantile Library building for Thomas Emery's sons. It is at 4th and Walnut Street. And Joseph Bernard, after the building was completed, they moved into a suite of offices on the 12th floor. And they stayed in the building until the early 1940s, but they did downsize. They moved in the building a couple of times, probably downsizing over the years. They also designed the Bismarck Cafe on the first floor, which was really a high-end restaurant. Another building downtown, these are the 3 main structures that they're noted for downtown, was the Hotel Metropole. And when the grand opening in 1912, 800 people showed up for the grand opening on New Year's Eve. And this was supposed to be quite a high-end hotel also. It had a beautiful Turkish bath. They said it was the most beautiful Turkish bath in all of Ohio. Unfortunately, the building was expanded to actually your right side there in 1924, and they took out the Turkish bath. The building fell into disrepair over the years. It was used for a lot of different things, and but then it was eventually put on the National Register of Historic Places, and then in 2012, it was converted to the 21C Museum Hotel, and the hotel kept the name Metropole for the restaurant, which is a really great restaurant. And I came across this beautiful porcelain sign on the lower right there in an antique shop, and I went to buy it, and they wanted $1,600 for it. So actually, I told the manager of the Metropole restaurant about it, and next time I went to the antique store, it was gone. So maybe they bought it. It'd be a great thing to have it in their restaurant. This is the American Druggist Fire Insurance Company building, better known as the American Building. It was built on Central Parkway just after the canal was filled in, just shortly after that time. And it was supposed to be the home of the American Pharmaceutical Association. And Cincinnati was in the running to have that organization here, Cincinnati, but they lost out to Washington, D.C. But it didn't hail it as one of the fine example of Art Deco architecture. It was the first building in Cincinnati, first office building to be air conditioned, and probably the first west of New York City to actually be air conditioned. And they had a huge underground parking garage. And this was 1928. People were just really getting used to automobiles, driving Model Ts and so forth. But they thought ahead and put in this large underground parking facility. And it was not designed after the Empire State Building. I've seen literature that says it was designed after the Empire State Building, but it was designed about 3 years before the Empire State Building was built. But it did have, in New York, it was required to have the building step back so that sunlight could reach the street level, and it does have that style. It's adorned with all these weird type of figures. These are a couple of them. There's a sign of the zodiac over the front door with other types of weird figures. And you can't see it, and really nobody can see it very well, but at the very top there's these beautiful designs at the top of the building. There's two small balconies there, and there's an eagle holding a flag. And if you don't have a telescope or a drone, you really can't see it very well. I don't know the significance of that. I mean, people really couldn't see it very well to enjoy it. The brothers were involved with many of the early successful businessmen in Cincinnati. They worked with Barney Kroger, and they worked with the Castellinis, Sterling Glass Company. How many people have Sterling Glass? Something from Sterling Glass at home? I know we do. They're still in business. I believe they're in Kentucky now. But they designed that building, which I'll show you in a minute. They did a lot of work for the Hudapole Brewing Company. And their partners, Felsberg and Gillespie, went on and also did work for Hudapole after the brothers passed away. A.S. Boyle was a manufacturer of floor polishes and floor waxes, and if you looked at any advertisements for any of the major department stores downtown, they all carry these Boyle products. And the Steinkamps designed a factory for them in Evanston. C.E. Shafter was the president of the Cincinnati Garter Company. Really, they made suspenders. The Steinkamps designed a home for him in Hyde Park, and a couple of apartment buildings for him. Also Thomas Kennedy, another businessman, and then Thomas Emery's sons. I mentioned the Emerys quite a bit. Whoops, sorry. Oh, first I want to show you, this is the Sterling Glass Company. It was up on top of Mount Adams. You can see the incline there, the Mount Adams incline. The other side of the building was the showroom, and this side that you're looking at was basically the factory where the products were made. As I mentioned, they worked with the Krogers. They designed some of their early grocery stores. They also designed a 7-story bakery in the downtown area, and Kroger became the grocery and baking company, and they started baking their own bread, and they were able to undersell their competitors. So the competitors weren't very happy about this, but Kroger kind of took over that market. Now, around the turn of the century, Cincinnati downtown was kind of isolated in a semicircle. We had the river on one side, with major hills on the other side, which were not, their roads weren't that good, it was difficult to get up. We know there were several inclines which helped people escape the city. The city was pretty nasty back then, kind of smelly, and that's being nice. You know, with all the animals and the industry down there, it was not a very great place to want to be all the time. So then the streetcars came along, first the horse-drawn, and then the cable, and then finally the electric. And this gave people an opportunity to get outside the city. So Thomas Emery's sons, when Thomas Emery passed away, his sons inherited quite a bit of money and started purchasing land in and around Cincinnati. They were already quite successful businessmen at the time. So I don't know if they were the very first to come up with this idea, but putting a large apartment building next to the streetcar line, especially at a stop on the streetcar line, was very advantageous. People could come out of their apartment building and get on the streetcar and go downtown. You could never do this before very easily. So the Steinkamps became the go-to architects for the Thomas Emery sons, and over the years they designed many of these large apartment buildings. These are just a few of them in Avondale. Actually, the one in the middle was for C.E. Schaffner, the businessman. This building has recently been restored. The two on the right are the North and South Warwick. They were both damaged by fire and eventually demolished, but the others are still in use. The Alexandria has been in Walnut Hills, has been renovated for housing for the elderly, a multi-million-dollar renovation, and you know, just to show you some of these examples. This one is interesting. It's Kemper Lane and McMillan on the corner there, and typically the Steinkamps did not have any financial interest in the buildings that they were designing. But in this case, Joseph Steinkamp partnered with Joseph Carew and some other businessmen and started this Guarantee Realty Company and actually built this large apartment complex. And just a few other, in Walnut Hills, the Navari, and the Garone is right next door. And for some reason, the Emerys like to use Spanish names for their apartment buildings. They had the Madrid and the Granada, the Castile, and several others. There were a number of other apartments that were built up around Bernard Avenue, which now they were demolished to make room for like Cincinnati Children's and some of the other hospitals up there. But there was quite a few apartments in that area also. One very unique one is the Verona Apartments. This was for wealthy Cincinnatians who wanted to escape the downtown. If you wanted to get away for the weekend, you would have an apartment at the Verona. It was renovated a few years ago, and it's really quite a magnificent building. You can see the plaque there that it was designed by Joseph Steinkamp and Joseph Bernard Steinkamp, and that the Emerys were the builders for originally. And in Clifton, a number of large apartments. The park side was built like a kind of a Y shape, so everyone would have a view of the park. And by the Esquire Theater in Clifton, there's these 5 huge apartment complexes, basically within like a 2-block area. The Roanoke, the Romaine, the Rutland, and so forth. The Steinkamps also had some collaboration with Mary Emery when she was developing Marymount. They were architects on the project originally, and they had designed this huge theater apartment complex, which would have sat across from where the hotel and the restaurant is now. And you can imagine this beautiful complex on there. Had covered walkways, that had shops, that theater apartments, but money kind of ran out towards the end of the project, and the Steinkamps were let go, and unfortunately it was never built. And we have in our audience Nancy Browerman here, who is the archivist, one of the archivists at St. Ursula Academy, and helped me research some of this information. And she also wrote the book about Moriah along with Storer and her life. Moriah is obviously the one of Brookwood pottery fame. But Moriah wanted to have a chapel where she could worship in the United States. She'd been to Europe, and rich people in Europe had their own chapel where they could go and pray. So she and her husband donated $10,000 to St. Ursula Academy to build a chapel. And St. Ursula had recently purchased 2 houses that were somewhat separated. So one of the sisters drew a sketch of what the chapel should look like, gave it to Joseph, and he designed the chapel. And what the brothers did was they connected the 2 houses, put the chapel in the middle, and put an apartment kind of above and behind for the Storers to live. And they lived there until they eventually moved to Europe. And you can't see very well, but on each side there are stained glass windows that they donated to St. Ursula. I think that Xavier University is probably their biggest accomplishment. They had done some work for Xavier College. Xavier used to be downtown on Sycamore Street, and they had done some renovations for the school. So the school was aware of them and what they could do. So they hired the Steinkamp brothers to develop the new buildings for the campus when they moved to on the previous slide. But they designed all of these. They designed classroom buildings, they designed dormitories, laboratory buildings, and so forth. They designed the Schmidt Field House. And how many of you know that Xavier had a football team at one time? Few of you, yeah. It didn't do very well. And they tried to bring it back, and it still didn't do well. So in 1938, they tore down the football stadium. But it was the Cincinnati Reds was actually the NFL football team at one time. 1934, they were the Reds, not the Bengals. And they played a game there and they lost, what was it, 13-0. Yes. Interestingly, the movie, The Best Years of Our Lives, the stadium is featured when the stars of the movie are flying in an airplane. The boy looks down and said, "There's Jackson High where I played football." And it was actually this stadium that they used in the movie. Okay, Price Hill and St. William Parish. In 1910, the Catholics in Price Hill got together and said, we need a church. We don't have a church, we need a church. So Joseph and Bernard designed this temporary wooden structure in the upper left-hand corner. And Joseph actually purchased the bells for this church because they didn't have any bells. A couple of years later, they also designed the St. William School. And I guess the enrollment was growing so rapidly, 3 years later, they had to design an addition to the school. And then a number of years sometime around then, the enrollment was still growing. So the story goes, they put the old wooden church on rollers, rolled it down the hill a block to the school, and used it as an auxiliary school building. And then, right in the heart of the Depression, they designed this beautiful St. William Church. It's been called one of the most beautiful churches in Cincinnati. However, it was a multi-million-dollar project, and they were seriously in debt. So, are you ready, Dean?
Yes, this is the story, the teaser.
What they did, they started church bingo. Really. And it was a huge success. The story is that streetcars were lined up on West 8th Street when they had bingo. People came from Indiana to play bingo. And it's rumored that this is how church bingo got its start. I don't know how true that is, but that's what they say. Also, St. Mark's Church in Evanston, the brothers were associate architects. So Chicago firm was were the primary architects on this one. Bernard lived very close by, and this is the church that he worshipped in, and from which he was buried when he passed away. In 2010, unfortunately, the church was abandoned. It's kind of been vandalized over the years, but there's a movement now to try to restore this church. It's a really beautiful church, and it's unique in that the bell tower is not attached to the church. This is what you would find in European churches, but not typically in this country. I just wanted to show you some of the homes. They designed all different styles of homes. The one on the upper left there was actually C.E. Schaffner's home in Hyde Park in 2009. It was severely damaged by fire, and a young couple have purchased it, and they brought it back to its original splendor. Just some of the different designs of the churches. The one on the right there is actually in St. Bernard. They did a lot of work in St. Bernard, a bank, funeral parlors, and different things. One funeral parlor now is the Wiedemann Brewery. They took it over a couple of years ago, and soon they're still open, and they converted one of the funeral parlors into a brewery. I don't know how, St. Bernard back then was quite a trek to go do work, but they did quite a bit of work up there. They may have family or friends that might immigrated from the same area in Germany that they were friendly with. In 1937, the brothers designed the Weston Hills Pumping Station. This is a beautiful Art Deco building. It was ahead of its time. It was all electric instead of steam, and it was very expensive. It was well over $300,000. But it has all this really unique and ornate decorations. You have this figure with lightning bolts pouring water to signify the electricity and the water. You have a quote from Byron. And at the bottom there, this is the detail inside this building. This is a municipal water pumping station. And look at the detail that was put into that.
It's on Queen City, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Last time I looked, it had about an 8-foot barbed wire fence around it. And you can't get to it, but Phil Armstrong, who I got these photos from, was able to get permission to go inside and take pictures of it. My pictures through the barbed wire fence didn't come out very well. In 1934, Joseph and Laura moved into this house on Anderson Ferry Road. And I don't have a record of it, but I assume he designed it himself. I was told by a family member there was like a lap pool in the back of the property and a couple of ponds back there. Unfortunately, it's kind of fallen into disrepair over the years, and it's kind of bad shape. Joseph lived there, and let's see, Laura passed away, and Joseph lived there until 1944. However, across the street is this really beautiful home that they designed for Laura's sister, Martha Menke Sifke, and her husband, Ed. And the owners of the home still have the original blueprints from the Steinkamps, and actually Felsberg and Gillespie collaborated on the design of this home. They did other work for the Sifke family. They designed William Sifke's home in Hyde Park. He was an undertaker. And they also designed the Sifke funeral parlor on 8th and Lynn Street. However, I tried and tried, but I could never find a photo of that building. You probably can't read it, but on the advertisement it says they're the only ambulance in town that has rubber tires on the wheels. If I had to write in that, I'd be glad it had rubber tires. Some of the homes on Innocent Ferry, there's a couple there that they have very similar designs. That were built around the same time, and they're unique, and they have this curved roof. All three of them, they have some very similar designs, and the two on the right, the center on the right, look like they could be designed by the Steinkamps. And another interesting evil spirit story. Evil spirits didn't like curved roofs because they would fall off. And I'm not making this up. And you see a lot of Chinese and Japanese buildings that have this type of curved roofs, and there's a name for it, but I can't pronounce it. I wanted to mention that younger brother, George, I'll be wrapping up here shortly. He was a Catholic priest, and in addition to other parishes, he was a pastor of St. John's, St. Mary's, and Our Lady of Mercy in Dayton. And each time he was at a parish, he got Joseph and Bernard to design a building for their parish, 2 schools and 1 church. He was often on the building committee too. Really. I know these architects. As I mentioned, Bernard passed away in 1943 after a fairly long illness. Joseph moved in with his son Albert on Relium in Price Hill, and he had an office in Pearl's Corner for a few years and did a little bit more work. Joseph was honored by the American Institute of Architects Cincinnati branch at a dinner for senior architects in 1940, and he was made member emeritus the following year, 1941. He was somewhat of an inventor. The coin locking mechanism, the best I can tell, is like a parking meter type of mechanism. And the one on the right is the kitchen cabinet that you could close up the kitchen. And if you've ever seen some of these shows on TV where people are building these mini little houses, they actually use some of this ideas like this, where you close off part of the house to use it for something else during the day or so forth. Joseph wasn't just an architect. He was chair of the Cincinnati Building Committee. He was involved with state and national building codes. He was president of the Cincinnati chapter of the AIA. He served as an expert witness for the city. He helped design the Laurel Street entrance to the New Union Terminal. And he spent the last year of his life in St. Francis Hospital and passed away in 1948. His obituary was in quite a few local papers and the New York Times. I told you that they designed one tunnel. Apparently the workers at the Emery Candle Works had trouble with the trains going by. They couldn't get across the railroad tracks very easily to go to work, and it was dangerous. So the brothers designed a tunnel underneath the railroad tracks. And the St. Bernard Historical Society believe this is the tunnel that they designed underneath the railroad tracks. So I have a book up here for sale, surprise. It does retail for $29.99, but I do a special for historical societies at $25. So if anyone is interested in that, I'd be glad to take any questions or comments. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know where he was buried?
Yes, St. Mary, both of them have buried at St. Mary's in St. Bernard, as I think many family members. Yes?
The firm's name was Joseph Steinkamp and brother. Is there any reason why the brother was not listed? Was he just a draftsman? Did the older brother own the company?
I'm not really sure. I think Bernard did a lot of the work. Like I said, Joseph was involved with a lot of other things. He wrote articles and went to meetings and so forth. I don't know why it wasn't Joseph and Bernard. Joseph started it and brought on his younger brother. That's all I know. Yes?
Is there any way that you can tell if a building is a Steinkamp? Like, if you were to go and look at a building, you could say, oh, this is clearly a Steinkamp because it has this architectural feature.
No. That's the short answer. Other people have asked me that, and really no. You can see the houses, they're all different designs, and I think a lot of that had to do with maybe the owners. Most of the owners of these homes I didn't mention were successful businessmen at the time, few business women, and they probably had an idea what they wanted their houses to look like, and told them what they wanted them to design. Many of these people also had offices in the Mercantile Library building, so it's possible, that they were friends with the Steinkamps and discussed, what kind of house they wanted. And as far as the other buildings, really no. Xavier buildings kind of look alike, and kind of look like the one on Mount Adams, but really no. It's not easy to tell. Yes?
They didn't design with pottery, did they?
No.
Okay.
No. I know, it's a
They
similar
just
style, yes. Yes, sir.
Where in Germany did the family come from?
Northwest area. I haven't researched it very much. It's something that I want to do. Yes?
Besides the residence, you mentioned original drawings. Have you been able to find many other original drawings, or at least copies of?
Actually, yes. I didn't mention one house on Liberty Hill downtown, kind of going up to Mount Auburn. Joseph designed it when he was 19 years old, and I've been in the house, and they have the original plans. And on Bernard's side, there were a number of architects on Bernard's side, grandson, great-grandson, and they had handed down some copies of, I was recently able to get copies of the American building, plans, blueprints, and I made copies of those, and also the football stadium in Xavier. Other than that, I don't know of any others. Dan's got the money.
I've got one question for you.
Yes, sir.
So unfortunately, the local realtors call everything with an exposed timber Tudor housing. And especially the first
or the second Steinkamp house that you showed that had the long timbers and the folk art heads, do you think that those are German half timber and not Tudor?
They could be, yeah.
Because they were from, where in Germany were they from? Oldenburg?
Yeah, that, somewhere
Northwest
like
Germany.
that.
So that's